think I was attracted initially to thinking about traditions in art and how, as authors of art, how we persist certain ideas about who we are and our society in sort of rethinking those traditions. I spent a lot of time walking in the woods with my kids and my family, and watching their interactions with our natural environment really sort of exaggerated what I thought was a much larger themes of how we interact with nature and our natural environment. I think that reaching a different age in my life with different responsibilities in relationship to my work, I felt it was time to look at a couple of traditions that run through all of my work and really address them in this show. So one of being, the still life, and one of thinking about the reclining figure or the reclining nude. In the work of Jan Bruegel the Elder and Junger's flower paintings, I'm interested in things from the past and how they show themselves in the present, how certain ideas, how certain forms, images, narrative structure, traditions persist in the present. And oftentimes the way that I use these things is that they're dismembered, and in their dismemberment from their past, that's where they become sort of enlivened again, but like a broken, rotting, bumbling thing. Seeing ourselves reflected in the forms and vistas of a mountain range or of a tree branch. That really informs a lot of how I think about figuration and have made figurative sculpture for the last 15 years. I read Nell Irvin Painter's History of White People, and it talked about the odalisque and how within the tradition of the odalisque, that there are ideas that relate to race, ideas of beauty in relationship to whiteness, and how those things become intertwined, and how artists were really kind of responsible for propagating certain racist mythology. And at the same time that you have all of 19th century sculpture and painting, largely like white women, nude, reclining on lounge or something like that. But then as those figures were laid out, the figures then went from portraiture, right, to then the vernacular of landscape painting structure. And so then the body becomes like terra, or like land. And I think that in the way that we project ourselves, both on those bodies, but also on landscape, that there's a relationship there. And so thinking about these reclining figures made out of the leftover, the castaway, the broken, the burned, and then defining that form, wherein the viewer to think human, but at the same time, like the vista or like the profile of a mountain range or of land. For whatever the sculptures are natural material, the paintings are entirely artificial. And so the paintings are an amalgamation of those materials, the intermingling of them to create the plastic of the formica or the epoxy resin that we use to cast the carpeting. I think that really the only material that's real is the lead. In all of the work that I've made with lead, that lead is always death, lead is always poison, lead is always that persistent thing that hems in the form that it's cast around by poison and death. And so in that regard, I kind of think of the lead in the same way that I think about the formica, is that it isn't what it is. But in terms of how do we affect positive change, it's how we interact with these traditions and with these histories.